نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره نتوب إليه نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يضل المؤمن من يضل فما تدري مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Close translation, brothers. We ask Allah, we only seek His help, ask Him to protect us from those forces outside of ourselves, but also those forces inside of ourselves which cause us even more problems. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us, because we recognize that any He has not guided will remain unguided. If He doesn't guide us, there's no one else to put us on the straight path. Dear brothers and sisters, I'd like to put together just a few short remarks today. This being two things. One, this is the school year, and many of us, if not all of us or most of us, are parents. We have our children. As Muslims, we have an obligation, like all the parents, to educate our children. But we have a broader obligation, if you'll permit me to suggest that. One, we have to educate them academically so they can fit in this world structurally, acquire employment, go on to higher grades in school, possibly seek professions. We also have to educate them in the home, like other parents and other people all over the world, to have them integrate a social structure, courtesy, patience. All of these things that we take for granted, they begin to learn in the home. How you deal with one another when you're angry, how you deal with one another when you don't get your way, when you have to make allowances for other people's requests. But we also have to educate them spiritually. The spiritual aspect becomes very important. They may go to an Islamic school, they may learn how to recite the Quran, they'll learn how to read the Arabic, they'll learn how to call the Adhan. But if they don't ingrain these things in the heart, they just become another way for the human being to show off. One of the Chinese philosophers, Lao Tzu, said that the worst way to educate people, especially children, is through reward and punishment. Give them something for doing good, what you want them to do, and withhold something if they fail to do it correctly or don't do it. Reward and punishment is what this educational system is based on. In Japan, they don't reward or punish, no grades for 4 years. 4 years, they're teaching their children character, ethics, social decorum, courtesy, restraint, because they know that these things are the things that they have to master early. Now, for our children, we have to do those things as Muslims. I stress more as Muslims than others. But there's another group who are also our students who are also sometimes neglect, and that's the new Muslims. So while we're trying to teach our children to be good Muslims, which is just another word for good human being, we're trying to also teach those new brothers and sisters who come into Islam what it means to be a Muslim. This cannot be learned through reading a book. Islam can't be transferred through reading about how to make prayer. Anybody can learn this. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Denzel Washington said that beautifully in the movie Malcolm X. He didn't believe a word of it. He's no more a Christian than any of the others outside of this system. So we have our children on one hand, then we have to make real the things that they're learning, the things that they're learning in the Quran, the things that we are telling them that Muslims are. We have to make these things real for them so they feel them. Here at the Masjid, we teach the boys how to call the Adhan. But many times you see the boys are just very proud that they've called it better than their classmate. We try and remind them, brothers, that after 1,400 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed you to step up here as a muazzin and call your brothers and sisters and classmates to prayers. This is an extraordinary blessing if you understand it. And that transcends anything that somebody could say you called the great Islam or you were better than anybody else. These are the kind of things our children have to come to understand about their religion. Where they learn them? From their fathers and mothers at home. If in the home, the structure is not one where patience and peace and calm are taught, if there's tension in the home because the father and mother can't control themselves, then the children can come and they can learn how to recite the Quran, they can learn Arabic, they can learn whatever they want, but it does not bring them the peace that Islam offers. On the other end, we have our new brothers and sisters. What do our children see? What do our new brothers and sisters see when they come to the masjid and the children are unruly? They haven't ingrained Islam. Do they understand? They begin to ask, what are these parents teaching their children? What is this religion anyway? I'm looking at my older brothers. They look at some of us as their senior brothers. Are we calm, respectful to one another? Or are we in discussions of nonsense and argumentative? So we as Muslims, brothers and sisters, we have so many students who look to us to see what Islam is. Doesn't matter what they read in the book. It doesn't matter what they read through the hadiths or had someone tell them in the hadiths. Do they see people of patience and love? Some of us, not infrequently, hear each other criticizing those who are Christians, those who follow Hebrew Israelite religions or Moors or whatever. One of the things that have been taught many thousands of years ago is that no true seeker of truth ever spits on the path of another seeker of truth. We don't know what has made some people Christians, what things have occurred in their lives to have them in a spiritual position that we see them in now. Our children must never ever hear us negatively criticize someone else's religion. That's not our place. We don't know enough about the person who's in those religions to criticize them. Our children, the new Muslims, are going to learn what Islam is and how to follow this deen from us. They should never ever walk into the masala and see silliness from grown men. There is no such thing as boxing and martial arts unless you're in a structured class at a structured time existing between a teacher and a student. It is not something practiced or showed off on in the front of children as they walk in, because then they don't know how to walk in. They don't know how to encounter each other. This is not teaching them to be men. This is teaching them to be silly. Our young Muslims, our students, all of them look to us. The Muslim may view himself in this way, brothers and sisters. We are always, always, always on stage. The lights are always on us. For one thing, we have people always trying to paint the worst possible picture of us. How we treat women, how we treat people who are not of our religion, how we treat people who are weaker, how we treat people who are poorer than we are. There's always those trying to create this negative image. Here I'll pause because we need to teach our children the history of where we come from. Great book written by an African-American author named Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro. But brothers and sisters from other countries, other continents, if you read that book and place your own name there, the miseducation of the Syrian, the miseducation of the Egyptian, the miseducation of the Lebanese, the miseducation of the Palestinian. All of these people have been miseducated by exactly the same people. Whether it's through colonization, whether it's through enslavement, they have given us images of ourselves and of one another which are not true. And they broadcast these negative images everywhere. I had a young Muslim call me today, and he's from Pakistan, his family, and he asked me, why do the African Americans use the N-word if they don't want other people to use it? Short explanation, I explained to him that when I grew up, I most certainly was not walking around in front of my grandfather using the N-word, and he didn't use it in front of me. Never heard my uncles use it. Never heard my aunts use it. Never even heard most people in the worst neighborhoods use it. This was placed there in recent years to create the worst image of the African American by bringing to the forefront the worst of those among us, the most ignorant and vile among us. But from Syria, Arabia, the same people that brought this back into the vernacular of the African American, they brought this insanity of those who want to talk about blowing things up into the Muslim community. The Pakistani, Indian are not violent people, but they have been able to insinuate this violent strand of conversation and dialogue within the Muslims. They create the image that they want created. And who taught us this many years ago? Elijah Muhammad. Nation of Islam taught people that these people are masters at deception, at lying, and creating lies, and placing everyone at each other's throats. When Europe began to dominate the world, they didn't just want the minerals, they didn't just want the resources, they wanted the spiritual nature of the human beings that they conquered. They wanted to make sure that when we met our Muslim brothers from other countries, we only knew about them what they taught us. They wanted to make sure that when our Muslim brothers met us, they only knew about the African American what they wanted us to know. They sent out the most vile messages through rap music, through all these different cultural things. The African American, Negro, colored, black, whatever term you apply, we don't wear our pants around our hips, and our women don't dress in short shorts. This is a recent creation. The violent, animalistic Muslims who blow up buildings and run people down the streets, this is a recent creation. But who was this directed toward? Our children. If we don't teach our children, brothers and sisters, the histories of where we come from, the struggles of our great-great-grandparents against the British, against the French, against the Dutch, if we don't teach them these things, then they believe that terrorism began at 9/11. That terrorism is just a euphemism for Muslim. Our histories are too important to allow to be thrown away. So in this teaching structure, we must teach our children our histories of where we come from, our histories of our great-great-grandparents who struggled against these different things. We must teach our children that the images they've given of Islam are incorrect, that the images that they've given of African Americans are incorrect, that these negative images are only the negative images. We have an example of the Prophet Muhammad, and that needs to be clarified and placed before our children in a dignified manner. We have an obligation not to demonstrate negative, silly behavior in front of other people. Dawah, for us, is not telling somebody you need to read the Quran. The Quran's not that easy just to read it and become a Muslim. Dawah for us is to explain to people, in a non-religious sense, what is Islam if you reduce it to its lowest common denominator. When you have a home where the father and mother don't have alcohol on their clothing, when the child takes his mother in his arms and does not smell generic smells, but smells her smell, her powder, her perfume, and it's not kadisak, gin, vodka, marijuana. This is a massive thing that's being done. When the child doesn't smell alcohol in his father, when people don't come into the home of alcohol, but it's not good enough that the Muslim tells people don't drink. The Muslim has to demonstrate something else. Patience, courtesy, dignified ways to refer to other human beings on this planet. No one gave any of us the right to look down on homosexuals, to look down on Christians, to look down on anyone else. We have enough just to bring ourselves into the construct of being decent human beings, is what the Prophet Muhammad said he came for in the first place. Just to create good character and morals. Just to be a good human being. These obligations for us begin in our houses, begin with our children, begin with our families. They extend to this masala outside of the door. Anyone who comes here should see dignified men walking, conducting themselves as a man should walk, with his backbone straight, his arms at his side, or in mild gestures. Martial arts, boxing belong in a structured place with a teacher, student, and a time given. It is not to be demonstrated for people just to walk up on. Our children should understand how to walk into the masala, how to deal in a classroom. They should be able to read and study the Quran and also see these things manifested in our actions. So, summarizing the first part, education. Education academically so that our children can achieve. Education within the household so they understand what courtesy and peace are. Now, also academically in the sense that they know how to implement these things they're learning in an Islamic structure. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to all bring us together as brothers and sisters. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase in us the understanding and desire to teach our history to our children. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to erase these negative images that very sophisticated people are placing before the world. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. I use Asr very frequently in the structure for our children in order to get them in the simplest possible way to understand what it is they're supposed to be doing in conversations. I remind them always that in this short surah, it is explained to them, one, that it is not only non-Muslims who are making proper suggestions to you. It is not only non-Muslims who will call you to do things you should not be doing. It is not only non-Muslims who will teach you forms of conduct that are not only not Islamic, but not human. It is these structures of conversation that if they're absent from any conversation our children have, absent yourself from those individuals. It doesn't mean you have to get up and run away. It just means that psychologically you recognize this is not someone I'm going to have coffee with. This is not someone I'm going to have lunch with. They're expressing to me who and what they are when those five structures are absent. If they're not talking patiently, courteously, if they're not teaching righteousness about doing good deeds, these don't have to be religiously expressed. They can be expressed as human beings. There again, our dawah brothers and sisters, especially to those family members who are not Muslims, is to educate them on what Islam really is, what it means to have a clean household. Where your fathers, grandfathers, where your uncles, brothers are not allowed to come and bring alcohol, not allowed to come in smelling of alcohol. Why? Because the household is clean. And one of the things that may happen is they themselves may seek that clean environment at very strange times. All these things educationally form what we call dawah. We are the dawah. We are the dawah for the rest of mankind. We've got to combat those negative things being placed there that are not us. We have to do these things before our families and friends. We have to volunteer. At the school here, we always need volunteers to help the children in mathematics and with computers. Where you have those skills, bring them to before Sister Nisa and Imam Fatim and let them know that you want to help the children in these areas. We must work together to build strong human beings. What we can see now, forget about politics, because that's not the primary mover, is a strong force to dehumanize a human being and to make him accept inhuman activities and pass them off as culture or pass them off as just the way things are. It is not just the way things are. It is not the way things were before. So brothers and sisters, let us pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases love between us, increases education between us, increases desire for us to know one another more, and iqamatus salah.